Thanks for joining our session. We would like to welcome you into the Digital Climate Smart Advisory investment session. And my name is Lisa Schrader. I'll be your moderator for the next 50 minutes. And thanks so much for joining. I'd like to just give you a quick overview of the session structure. So first, we'll be introducing our panelists for our topic, and each one of them will give you a quick 5-minute overview of their area of expertise and their area of engagement in the field of investment in climate smart services. And then we're going to go to you, so prepare yourself. We're going to have a short poll. We'd like to know more about you and your interests, and we'll gather some of that feedback and get a sense of the temperature in the room. And then we'll go back to a quick discussion among the panelists with a couple of leading questions, and then we'll come back to you. And hopefully we'll have about 10 minutes at the end of the session for question and answer. So we would like to encourage you to be active, keep on listening, and send us your questions in the chat. We'll be watching and we'll be organizing those for the closing discussion. And so, as you know, the session is being recorded. And again, we're really looking forward to your feedback. This is a new stream of work for the Digital Agri Hub. And we're really learning a lot from the experts and from you about what the gaps, the opportunities, and the needs are in the space of climate smart investment. So as you know, this is a really nascent area in digital agriculture, but extremely critical. We're understanding that there are more than 300 million smallholder farmers around the world who have no access to climate smart information, but they need to be able to adapt and mitigate those impacts very, very quickly over the next 5 years to make a difference and be part of the climate change that we have to see around the world. So this is an area of investment that I've been looking at for the last couple of years, a lot of new companies coming in, and we need to be finding the best possible solutions and lining them up for rapid scale. So this is going to be one of the key topics with our experts here. And let me go ahead and just and introduce them. And just really quickly, Inder, would you like for me to project the slides now, or will the team project the slides? Okay, if not, if I don't hear anything, then I'll just go ahead and project the slides myself. Here we go. All right, so I hope you can see my slides. If not, please let us know in the chat. As you may know, the Digital Agri Hub is really positioning itself as a global hub and resource for ag tech providers and investors and ecosystem stakeholders around the world. And one of the most important areas that's emerging as a practice group or practice area for the Digital Agri Hub is digital climate smart advisory services. So if you go onto the website for the hub, you'll see some resources that might be of interest, including the work around the COP side event, the COP26 side event, an insights brief, and a blog post that's really drawing on insights and data that's coming from the AgriHub dashboard. And if you haven't visited the website for the AgriHub, the Digital AgriHub, you'll see that there is an interactive map or dashboard that draws on data points from solution providers around the world and allows you to essentially kind of choose regions that you would like, specific focus areas that you would like, and to learn more about solution providers across the globe. And we encourage you to interact with the map, and we're constantly updating it. And please do reach out to the Digital Agri Hub if you would like to profile your solution, or if you think that there are solutions that should be included in the database. So with that, we're gathering a lot of information, we're learning a lot, and looking forward to hearing from our experts and from you. Let me go ahead and introduce our panelists. So first we have Victoria Close, who is the Climate Smart Agriculture and Technology expert at the Mercy Corps AgriFin programs. And I've had the privilege of working with Victoria for many years now in Africa. Victoria has 10 years of background in digital agri-tech, working with mobile network operators around the world. She leads the Climate Smart portfolio at Mercy Corps AgriFin, and she's also worked with the GSMA, MCOPA, and many other tech leaders in the ag space over the last 10 years. So she's really a fantastic expert in the space and has recently been collecting landscape data on solution providers in the climate smart space for East and Southern Africa. And next, I'd like to introduce Chris Wayne. And Chris Wayne is an associate director at Acumen, and he leads Acumen's investment policies on smallholder agriculture, supporting local teams to source and structure agricultural transactions. Chris joined Acumen in 2021 and has been working across the Americas in the United States, but also in Costa Rica and throughout South America, looking at agricultural solutions as well. So it's great. Across our panel, we have Africa, the Americas, and then we have Janvi, who I hope is on the line now. Janvi Paprawal, who is an investor and development finance enthusiast. And she is working with Avishkar Capital, where she's in charge of the portfolio related to agriculture and construction. Avishkar is she's leading the Sustainable Agriculture and Climate Change Fund, and they're managing over $450 million in assets in India. So hopefully, Janvi, she was having trouble getting on the line. Hopefully she's with us now. But we'll go ahead and we'll move into our panel introduction. And maybe I'll ask Victoria to be our first speaker, just to give a quick overview of her work and her background. And then we've asked each of the panelists to really kind of talk about this space. Oh, great, Janvi, see you're on board, great. We're asking each of the panelists to just take a little bit of time to talk about not only their own experience, but also what they see as the opportunities, the gaps, and the real needs to accelerate climate investment in DCAS. Victoria, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Lisa, and hi everybody. It's great to be here today. Lisa's given a good introduction to who I am and what I do, but excuse me, for those of you who don't know AgriFin, it's a program based out of Mercy Corps. I've been with the team for 2 years, based in Kenya, in Nairobi. AgriFin's model is that with support from donors such as Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others, we support the development, the testing, and the scale out of what we call digitally enabled services for smallholder farmers. So our model, just very briefly, is that we work really as an innovation partner with private sector scale partners. So that could be banks, mobile network operators, agribusinesses, and tech innovators. And over the last, since 2015, we've completed 200 engagements with over 150 of these partners. And we've reached 8 million farmers with registered services. So that gives you the background. In terms of the opportunities, I think there's so much that I could say here, but I think just obviously to start with the demand, and I think this is obvious sometimes, but when you think of a smallholder farmer, they really are facing some pretty major challenges. So, I mean, just simple things like not knowing when the rain will start. You know, farmers actually need to know when to plant. So that information that we take for granted of when we expect the rain to come, that information is still really important and seems basic, but that's still very critical. And then obviously the complex needs when it comes to new pest outbreaks and other complications that climate change is bringing. I think in terms of opportunities, as Lisa mentioned, there's what we see as a huge pipeline or a growing landscape of exciting innovation in the kind of digital climate smart ag space. So everything from early warning alerts to yield forecasting models, training farmers via SMS on soil management, and even things like, using alternative data sets around things like soil health to score credit worthiness, for example. So yeah, just to sum up on that, I think I would say that there's a huge amount of opportunity. There's obviously some services are more mature, such as the insurance aspect, but there is a huge gap and a huge need still to support the more early stage innovation, as well as the basic information, let's say like the DCAS or digital climate advisory services that are based on weather, simple weather alerts that are linked or tied to a farmer's location. So I think, yeah, just thinking about those gaps a little bit more and the need to promote greater kind of investment. If we think about digital climate advisory services specifically, I think there's a few areas which I would highlight, and one would be data collection to make what we call precision or decision agriculture a reality. So we really need to know smallholder farmers' locations. We need to know what crops they're growing and when they planted those crops to then enable the models behind these climate advisory services to be effective at a smallholder level. And then I think the second one is really just, we still need excellent content. We need, so when I say content, I mean the training materials, the actual message that a farmer will receive that will hopefully incentivize behavior change. So it's linking the climate data, the climate, all the climate knowledge that we're building up with that specific advisory that's tailored to smallholder farmers. And then finally, I think just a lot more investment and a lot more work on business models for DCAS. You know, this age-old question of who will pay, how can we actually make these services sustainable? Because they're expensive to set up and to build. And yeah, just I think that would be my final point. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Victoria. It's great to get the on the ground perspective from all of the companies that Agrifin is working with in Africa as a kickoff to the conversation. And I think we'll move now to Chris for his perspectives from Acumen.
Great. Well, thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Victoria, for sort of setting the table here for me. My name is Chris Wayne. I'm, as Lisa said, the Associate Director of Investing in Agriculture, sort of a title I could never have made up as a little kid with a dad as a farmer, but very happy to be here in the role. I get to sort of support our regional offices on the development of a global ag strategy and search out and invest in innovative business models that are driving impact at the center of smallholder ag, poverty, and climate change, which is sort of Acumen's mission. We're a nonprofit taking a new approach to problems of poverty. We have a pioneer model that resembles sort of an evergreen venture fund, but with some significant differences. We continuously raise philanthropic capital and use it to make equity and debt investments. And when we exit our stake in a company, that capital is returned to Acumen rather than to investors to make new investments and cover management costs. That's our pioneer model. We do have commercial funds under a separate model. For the last 15 years, we've been working towards improving smallholder incomes by investing in early stage entrepreneurs, agribusinesses that do center those smallholder farmers as customers or suppliers. Average ticket size of $350K to $750K. To date, have deployed around $36 million in 34 agribusinesses across 11 countries with impacted lives of around 40 million. In the mid-2000s, when we started our ag investing, we were new, and our strategy focused primarily on sort of innovative inputs, with the hypothesis being that smallholders were poor primarily because their yields from farm incomes were low. While we learned that's true, there's also a whole host of other sort of significant constraints on smallholders that keep them poor. Includes things that folks have discussed already here, but lack of credit, and especially cheap credit, lack of access to markets, and maybe most importantly for the conversation today, lack of access to training, extension, and advisory that would sort of help them adapt to this dramatically and quickly changing climate. And then to sort of achieve those desired impacts for smallholders, we needed to look at more comprehensive business models than what we were looking at before. In 2021, we produced a report called Resilient Farmers that was in collaboration with the Busara Center and with support from FCDO, which interviewed 360 smallholder farmers in Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and Tanzania. And learned, no surprise, that farmers are acutely aware of climate change and the impacts on their farm. And they know what it is, they know how it's impacting them, and they really appreciate digital platforms offering both high quality inputs and access to markets, but also the sort of training and expert advice that we're talking about today. So this is an issue that's sort of central to our ongoing strategy here at Acumen. Our entrepreneurs similarly are keenly aware of the impact climate change is having, and are figuring out how to integrate training and advisory into their models. But they're faced with a real challenge. And I think our experience has shown that despite the smallholders valuing assistance and advisory, a lot of them are unwilling to pay for standalone climate advisory services. So what we've seen is a lot of innovation from entrepreneurs around how to integrate climate advisory into core offerings that include other products and services in sort of a bundled service approach. We'll talk a lot more about that today. But our experience is that bundle almost always needs to include some component of access to markets in order to be successful, at least in our experience, which is limited. I think I think it's important just for this conversation from a challenge perspective to add that behavior change is super slow. Farmers across the world, this is not limited to smallholder farmers in developing countries, are deeply hesitant to change given the outsized risks they face in operation of their business. And even a small on-farm behavioral change from what we've seen can take 3, 4, 5 seasons to be integrated and be adopted. And it's only really after the value of the product or service has been sort of unequivocally proven out. So this is not easy work. And in our experience, it's why digital climate advisory services really shouldn't replace person-to-person communication, but rather play a sort of support role to on-the-ground support and extension advisory. And when DCAS is sort of utilized as an enabler for supporting on-the-ground services, it can drive faster adoption and more impactful outcomes. Most farmers, in our experience, are really discerning practitioners of new technology. I mean that they are no less capable of judging cost and benefit than any of us. They live closer to the land than many of even the entrepreneurs that are servicing them, building solutions. So that means that building that trust with them, showing them the real value of a product is crucial to that adoption. So we definitely see a few critical gaps, and I'll kind of close up here. The first for us is a need for more flexible financial instruments to meet these sort of actual capital needs. And I don't just mean the capital itself, but where and how that capital is applied, especially for early stage entrepreneurs. Secondly, I think it's really important to develop more realistic return expectations from the investor community broadly on what these models can and can't do. We are not seeing the type of returns that are touted in many of the white papers in this work, and I think it's important for us to be honest about why and what that looks like. And then finally, as a group, I think this is a constant refrain here, but we need to develop context relevant and practical impact frameworks that we can all sort of share, deliver a consistent message out to our agribusinesses and to the smallholder farmers that are filling those databases. So I'll leave it there, but thanks and happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks so much, you and Victoria, for kicking us off well and keeping to time very efficiently. So we'll have time to talk to the audience. I'll go ahead and introduce Janvi. Please go ahead and introduce your organization, what you do, and what you see as the opportunities and the challenges that we're facing.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you so much for inviting me for this panel. So my name is Janvi Papriwal. I'm a director at Avishkar Capital, and I oversee investment management, right from deal sourcing, portfolio management, exits. I also lead sectoral initiatives in sustainable agriculture and climate. Talking about Avishkar Capital, we are an impact investing fund present in India primarily since over 2 decades. Focusing on India, of course, and also have expanded to Southeast Asia and Africa. We manage more than $400 million of assets, have made about 70 investments across these geographies, and 60 specifically within India. We have exited about 80 companies, so have a strong track record there. We have completed 5 fund cycles across India right now, in the process of raising a 6th India-focused fund, which is targeted about $250 million. We invest in several sectors apart from food and agriculture, there being financial services, financial inclusion, as well as other sectors such as healthcare, education, and so on. But having said that, food and agriculture is very up our alley, and we invest about 35 to 40% of our fund size in food and agriculture. We are typically early to early growth stage investors, investing anywhere between $5 to about $15 million at early stages. Till date, we have impacted about 10 million odd farmers through our investments in the food and agriculture space. So talking further about this sector and how we're looking at the opportunities, India has about 150 million farmers, and 85% of them are small and marginal. And unfortunately, they have been victims of information asymmetry, lack of access to right quality agricultural inputs, low mechanization, low irrigation, limited warehousing facilities, limited cold storage, limited access to markets. And all of this has made them very vulnerable to vagaries of nature. And that is only getting exacerbated with the climate change that we're seeing around. And this often leaves them with poor realizations, low yields, And all of these challenges present immense opportunity to digitally intervene the ecosystem and offer solutions to these farmers. And also from a climate perspective, we are seeing limited awareness and appreciation from the farmers towards shifting towards sustainable agricultural practices, including right cropping decisions, usage of organic crop nutrition, crop protection products, and even in case of inorganic inputs, right, usage of the right quantities of water, soil property conservation. All of these needs immense awareness and education amongst the farmers. Furthermore, India stays at a population of about 5 billion by 2050, and today 30% of the population is undernourished. Hence, we are facing a looming crisis of water shortage, of food security, and there's an urgent pressing need to shift towards sustainable agricultural practices. So yeah, I think the opportunities are immense, and all of these challenges are being addressed by several startups, and I think there are a lot of tailwinds in the sector in India. Technology, the intersection of technology, capital, and entrepreneurship, along with governmental support, is really creating a very vibrant ecosystem for investing in the agricultural space. In fact, agri-tech is one of the hottest investment destinations in India today, and I really have no reason to complain. I think we are at the right time to bring about all the changes that we want to see in the agricultural ecosystem in India. So several opportunities, that we have invested in and we are evaluating from our upcoming fund, and the Encompass climate advisory using smartphone apps, IoT-enabled precision farming, soil health monitoring, irrigation, controlled farming, soilless, vertical, tech-enabled market linkages, digital marketplaces, tech-enabled aggregation, logistics. We're also seeing micro warehousing, food brands centered around superfoods, having direct linkages with the farmers. And finally, lending with the rich quality of data that a lot of these startups are producing. It's enabling lenders to penetrate into the hinterlands of the country where farmers have limited access to quality, cheap finance, and several of these initiatives are supporting credit underwriting. And I think challenges continue to be in the sector. I think for investors, I think some of the challenges that one needs to be aware of, while I said that the sector is extremely lucrative for investing in the startups in India today, but there is limited understanding about the agricultural sector, even among the investors, right? Because one can do only this much of secondary research, being in the financial hubs of Mumbai, Bangalore, and Gurgaon, whereas the end consumers, the beneficiaries, are far, far away. And hence, understanding the nuances of the farmers' psyche, their ability to pay, how they're able to trust the startups, given that they've been for a very, very long time, the receiving end of several malpractices in the ecosystem, and being at the mercy of climatic changes. It's a challenge getting right there on the ground and creating solutions for farmers for which they are willing to pay. I think these are some of the challenges that are very critical for the ecosystem to further grow. So I'll stop there and allow you to take charge, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Janvi. I was on a webinar with the World Bank and the Indian tech community last week that really, or maybe it was earlier this week, that really amazed me in terms of the scale that you're reaching in India. And so it's interesting to hear that it's the hottest thing, out there. And I think that's really encouraging. How we can make that all work for climate is really the challenge we want to address ourselves to. And I think right now what we'll do is we'll go to our poll. we'd like to hear from you. There are going to be 3 questions, and my colleague Ender is going to be putting them up so that you can vote. They're multiple choice. There are 3 questions, multiple choice, and you can click all that apply. And then we'll get some information back from you. And I realize not everybody on the panel or in the audience is an investor. So please, if you are an organization seeking investment or another type of ecosystem, just flip it. Flip the question to where they're most relevant to you. What are the key needs for you, and the key gaps for you? So Ender, why don't you go ahead and get the poll rolling? Okay, breakout poll 1. What are the most interesting climate investment targets for you? This is multiple choice, so you can choose all that apply. Is it digital climate advisory services, or things like post-harvest loss, where I know John B has a lot of experience, insurance, carbon credits, or other? Please check all that apply. The host and panelists can't vote. And then the second question is, what are the critical information? What is the critical information you need to increase climate investments for small scale producers? Proven climate impact of solution? Do you need scale of outreach? Do you need location data, more information about the location that you're working in, more farm data? Do you need more information about the financial performance of these solutions or other? And then the last question is, what do you need to learn more about? And I thought it was interesting that John V said, not everyone knows about ag. And that's amplified by the fact that not everyone knows about climate. We're all learning about climate now. So what do you need to know more about? Localized climate solution, digital climate advisory services, and the providers, or digital climate smart advisory business models, supporting government activities and roles. I think those are some of the tailwinds that maybe John V was talking about. That's helpful. What are the optimal bundles of climate and other services? And then just hit other if there's something else. Just go ahead and click all that apply, and then we'll have a look and see what you think. We need like some of that great music from one of the game shows. Ender, just let us know when you're ready to put up the screen. And just want to encourage people, once you've answered the poll, please feel free to share any questions that you might have. I know there was one question that came through for Victoria about the nature of whether AgriFin works with the Met departments. Victoria, do you want to answer that one just while we're waiting?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I actually responded in the chat. It was quite a really interesting question, actually, something that I'd like to follow up with the person that posed the question. Yeah, so I've responded to it, but happy to touch on that. I mean, I think the question was really around have we worked with let me get it up quickly while everybody's filling out the do Mercycorp support production side and producer user interface platforms. So for example, participatory scenario planning of climate services. I mean, we have done a lot of work with, for example, in Kenya with Calro, who work closely with the Met Department in Kenya, for example. And again, obviously in Ethiopia, we've worked with ATA, who have close ties with, the national Met Departments. But I think this question is really interesting, thinking about this participatory scenario planning. So I'd love to follow up with you and Njoki. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Victoria. And let's look and see what we've learned. So what are the most interesting climate investment targets? Okay, so we're leading off with digital climate smart advisory itself, tied with post-harvest loss. Very interesting. I mean, I think there's climate advisory, and there are also actually like climate smart services like post-harvest loss bags or silos. Insurance is of interest. Carbon credits, definitely of interest. I know that this is something we're all really looking at, is how can we help small scale producers participate in carbon credit markets and really have the incentives and the payout that will make a difference for the millions and millions of acres under cultivation by small scale producers. And then 9% other, so the mystery other. Let me go ahead and go to the second one. What is the critical information you need to increase climate investments? And so again, here we're looking at outreach to farmers. That's interesting. And then it looks like, actually it looks like farm data is the most important. And this makes a lot of sense. If you want to be climate smart, you actually need to know quite a bit about the local context and the specific farms that you're working with. So location data, I know at AgriFin, we're working with a lot of governments and different partners to geotag farmers so we can get that farm data, get that location data. But it looks like outreach is important. A lot of these solutions are very, very small. Proven climate impact is still early days, and financial performance. Let's look at number 3. What do you need to learn more about? Local, looks like a lot of learning. It looks like it's concentrated mainly around localized climate solutions. So what's out there? That's a great objective of the Digital Agri Hub, is to get the climate solution information up on the dashboard. And then business models, we're gonna be talking about that in a minute, and optimized bundles. So, okay, great. This makes a lot of sense. Any immediate response from our panelists about the areas of interest? Anything resonate for you?
I think no surprise that we're in the deep.
Good. It's always good when 2 people answer at the same time. Go ahead, John V, maybe you ladies first.
Yeah, thanks. No, there was one point on governmental support. So, while there are tailwinds with the government coming up with policies that are favorable for agriculture and smallholder farmers, we tend to avoid investing in startups that are dependent on government policies or the favorable outcomes, because we really don't want to risk our investments with probably changing government policies. So I just wanted to make that note here.
Okay, great. And Chris, what was your point?
Great point, John V. I think I was just going to add in that the inherent localness of agriculture and the need for that jumps out to me is the need for highly contextualized information going out to smallholder farmers. And some of our earlier investments struggled with that in providing specifically weather-related data that was hyper-specific, hyper-local in a way that actually impacted the farm that way. So that definitely jumped out.
Okay, very good. And Victoria, any other observations? Anything resonate from you from the feedback from the audience?
Yeah, I was just happy to see the first 2 in the first poll, the most interesting ones being the carbon credits and post-harvest loss. So yeah, just wanted to note that. But yeah, I think those are 2 big opportunity areas with different challenges, of course.
Okay, great. Well, we've got, we'll move into now some questions for the panel, and then which I'll moderate, and then we'll move into Q&A from the audience. You still have time to send through more questions. And again, we're just looking at opportunities, challenges, and needs for investment in the climate smart space. So one of the things that obviously is super important for investment is the business model itself. So I have a question to the group, particularly to Chris and Victoria. I know we talked about this earlier about what are the emerging individual business models that can sustainably drive digital climate advisory services. They're difficult to make profitable in and of themselves. And what can we learn from investment challenges and failures from the past? And maybe I'll ask Chris to speak to this first.
Sure. And I'll put a disclaimer on this that we've made a few investments in the space, but we're in no way experts in the space. So I'll be interested to hear what the audience and the rest of my panelists have to say. And I'll also point out that we focus almost exclusively on smallholder farmers, 2 hectares or less, often living below or at the poverty line. So we work with entrepreneurs, but their focus in order to sort of pass our investment criteria is that they focus on smallholder farmers, commercial inclined smallholder farmers, but very much bottom of the pyramid we're talking about here. So I'd say early in our ag investing, this is back in the mid 2000s through mid 2010s, we invested in a few kind of pure play B2C digital advisory extension models. 2 of the investments that started as B2C eventually evolved into B2B, or business to government or institution, primarily due to the difficulty in getting farmers to pay even a small weekly or monthly fee for a pure play digital agriculture or digital climate advisory service. Certainly recognize that there are successful models in that space, and I don't want to discredit them, but they were not successful for us. We also recognize that they're successful sort of B2I and B2G models out there in Acre Africa, and ECX. Those are two that come to mind right away. But in the B2G space specifically, our investees struggled with those models because government contracts traditionally are slow, very lumpy, and often late, which can be a real struggle for working capital and cash flows within small businesses that way. So that was a sort of a big early learning for us. So in some of the other kind of problem and issue areas, failure points really, as I mentioned before, some of the products and services were really not well tailored to the audience. There was feedback from farmers and some of our early investees that specifically the weather advisory services were not appropriately localized. I just mentioned that, but also that they only included a single day's weather included in the advisory, limiting sort of the ability for a smallholder to farm. So I think that technology is dramatically improved, but that early on, that was sort of an issue for smallholders seeing a value there. And yeah, now we're looking really at how DCAS can be integrated into sort of these larger bundles of services for smallholders. And I think it's a difficult decision for businesses here. They sort of have three options. They can integrate the cost of DCAS into a revenue model that's managed often by sort of achieving a significant enough increase in product quality or volume that results in a premium sufficient to cover the cost of those services, and that's probably the most sustainable model. In others, and I think John, we spoke to this a little bit, they utilize or depend on partnerships with NGOs or governments to sort of provide those services through key partnerships. And in other cases, they're just dependent on philanthropy or government support to sort of capital to sort of subsidize the cost there. So I think that's sort of an overlay of what we've seen. There are models that are making this work. I think the jury is still out on how to actually fund and support them. And I think it brings up larger questions of who other stakeholders may need to be in this space to make it be successful going forward. But I'll leave it there.
That's great. Thanks so much, Chris. I think that really resonates. Victoria, is there anything else you'd like to say on that point? I know it's an area where you engage a lot.
Yeah, I think just on the point around the kind of emerging business models to try and get past this issue of who pays when it comes to DCAS. And I think the point you raised, Chris, around the bundles, I think bundles are proven, I would say now, that bundling in the information with a host of other services is what farmers prefer and therefore drives greater sustainability. But I think what's interesting to think about as well with DCAS and trying to shift behavior is what kind of incentives can you put in that bundle? So can you tie, rather than a farmer waiting till the end of the year for the carbon credit payout, for example, in the current way that it is structured, can you front load the incentives with, free soil tests or whatever else it might be that's, will then kind of make that bundle more effective, if you like, and therefore whoever, the cost of the DCAS can be shared across all the bundle partners. So that was something that I think we're starting to hear a bit more about that. And then on the second point, really around the localization, which you raised, and that's often why the weather information services or many of the kind of advisory services in general for farmers have not succeeded, is that they're just not relevant enough for a farmer to act on. And so I think this model of using agents out in the field, building up these agripreneur or village-based advisor or rural agent models where the agents can actually be equipped with a smartphone, be effectively trained to provide that really localized digital climate advice. And so I think building up those agents is potentially an easier way to overcome that barrier of how do we get location data from farmers at scale? How do we ask them when they planted, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think those are two hopefully exciting new or kind of emerging areas in the business model around DCAS.
Thanks, Victoria. I think that's a larger question for us all to be thinking about, is how DCAS can be bundled in with other services to be scalable, to be relevant, to be adopted, et cetera. Maybe I can hand that one over to Janvi for her perspective. And there was also an interesting question from the audience that maybe I can mix in there for Janvi, and pitch you two questions at the same time. One of them was that there is a lot of DCAS activity that's either very early stage or just stuck in a small scale trap. As I said, in India, it's really kind of amazing. I mean, you look at like DCAS with 600,000 farmers on it. I mean, we've worked with Digifarm in Kenya with 1.3 million registered farmers, but getting to the scale drivers, bundling, finding the optimal bundle and really driving scale is where we need to go. So love to hear your perspective on those two questions from the group.
Thanks, Lisa. And I agree, both these questions are quite interrelated. So bundling of solutions, I think, is not really an option going forward for companies to scale. Because solving for farmers' problems, I mean, if one is focused on just say inputs or advisory, you're not really solving all of the farmers' problems, and they would have to look out for other alternatives for solving their other problems, such as market linkages, access to credit, and so on and so forth. Through our investments, specifically in AgroStar, in Argos, we have seen these companies evolve their business models. AgroStar had started off in 2013 as advisory and providing agricultural inputs directly to the farmers. Over time, they have digitized their offerings from a mobile phone, from a telecalling sort of a solution. They moved to a mobile smartphone app-based solution. Started offering this services through an Amazon sort of a marketplace, as well as a Facebook sort of a social networking platform where farmers can interact with each other and also get responses to their queries in real time. Moving forward, the company would also get into the output linkages where farmers can get access to food processors and also get access to credit going forward. So a company that was solving for say input and maybe weather related information and other services has gotten into multiple areas. Likewise, Argos, which is a micro warehousing company, has also started offering credit on warehousing receipts, has also started offering market linkages to the farmers. So this is a need of the farmer, and it's also an opportunity for the startup to expand their services, expand their revenue, reduce their customer acquisition costs, improve their margins and profitability. But another challenge to scale is the fact that agricultural solutions are not 100% tech. These are often supported by on-ground resources. As Victoria rightly pointed out, that there is a need for agripreneurs who could, liaise with farmers, who could provide ground truthing abilities, to triangulate the data that one gathers from satellite or IoT, etc. There is logistics involved if you are providing input and market linkages, and there are field service officers if you are providing credit. And hence, rapid scaling of these startups is challenging. There is physicality, there is a huge physical presence element out here. But having said that, I'm really happy to see several startups in India scaling very rapidly. The heart is growing nearly 100% year on year. AgroStar, Argos, they're growing at 100-200%. So yeah, I mean, bundling of services along with physical touch points is a challenge and an opportunity both.
Great, thank you. We're getting more great questions from the panel, from the panelists, and we're just told we have an extra 5 minutes, which is awesome. So one of the tough questions that just came through was, bundling sounds great, but tell me about which solution providers that you know of have done this in a way that's profitable. And so I'll throw that across to all of you guys. Who do you know in your universes that's been profitably doing this? And I'll let you guys think about that for a second. And just, from my experience, I know that one that we really have been impressed with over the years, because I've been working with Victoria over at Agrifin as well, is Pula, that does crop insurance and has is an insurance provider, but basically has realized that in order to sell insurance, it's got to be bundled with inputs. It's got to be bundled with financial services. It's got to be bundled with advisory services. Those guys have even bundled into tractor services. So, one thing that, and Pula is now officially profitable. Which I never would have dreamed of if someone asked me 7 years ago, which of your tech partners is going to be, I never would have dreamed it would be an insurance provider. But I think that they have used bundling in a way that's been very responsive to each country context that they work in. And every context is different. Like we've seen them work in Zambia with government, in Nigeria with tractor providers, in Kenya with World Food Program. So, it really, the bundling question is not, I'm the moderator. I'm not supposed to answer these questions, but I just thought I'd get in there and throw in the first one. Who would like to go next of a concrete service that's really climate smart and is becoming profitable and leveraging bundles? Who would just raise your hand if you want to go? Okay, go ahead, John B.
Oh, I saw Chris unmute himself, so I'd allow him to take it first this time.
It's all you, John V. Go ahead. I'll follow after.
Okay, thanks again. So I can talk about AgroStar, which I just talked about. They were in the input space and advisory and moved to digital app. So happy to share that they are pretty good on gross margin. And like you said, Lisa, it was very hard to imagine them turning profitable a few years back. But with the right interventions across their offerings, with rapid scaling and bundling, they've been able to achieve these numbers. Argos as well is on the pathway to profitability. In fact, at a limited scale, they were far more profitable with the kind of ambitious growth that they have embarked upon. They've been burning, but at an operating level, they are positive. So happy to share these two examples with you. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, those are great examples, and I think pathway to profitability is a helpful way to frame this. I'm going to point to, well, I'll give you the framework. We think about smallholder farmers needing 6 primary things in order to run functional, profitable, and climate resilient farm businesses. Those are inputs, infrastructure and equipment, markets, financing, technical assistance, and land. And we're seeing more and more that our investments are actually covering 4 or 5, if not all 6 of the different gaps necessary to fill those blanks. That's sort of part of our theory of change and investment thesis here. I'll point to an investment in India called Kheti, which is a greenhouse in a box program. The founders there came up with a really innovative, super cheap, smaller scale greenhouse as their core offering, but recognized very early on that in order to be successful in that, they needed to bundle together financing for that in partnership with microfinance institutions and other small banks. They needed to provide great access to high quality inputs in order for the product to grow well in the greenhouse. They needed the technical assistance and crop advisory for people transitioning from field agriculture into high tunnel or greenhouse agriculture. And then they needed market offtake was kind of the big closing piece here. And that was a major pull for them. But so something that started out just as a sort of infrastructure and equipment play ended up being a massive sort of multi-bundled service, recognizing that all those gaps existed for smallholder farmers in that space. That's a 2019 investment. They've shown great profit margin growth and EBITDA growth over the last 3 years. I think the profitability, I'll still say, is outstanding. I think we want to see a couple more years of growth, but it's been an early sign and an early grower that we're really excited about in India.
Great. And Victoria, would you have an example you'd like to bring forward?
I think just one thing I wanted to add on this, because it's a tough question that, to be honest, there really aren't that many, I guess. But I think what we've seen is, when organizations come in and are really, passionate about wanting to work with smallholder farmers, but are not necessarily finding organized groups of smallholders, I think, their kind of core business or their focus tends to move away because they realize it's tough, and they move to kind of like, organized farmer groups or more commercial farms. And I just think that something around how they can make it work, how they can prove the value for those types of organizations, how can that kind of be applied back to kind of make this more sellable, I guess, at the smallholder or more disorganized smallholder level, or maybe that's just, yeah, just something to note on the side.
And maybe that point leads into, an interesting area that we wanted to explore about blended finance. Because when you started talking, Victoria, I was thinking a lot about Sun Culture, who provides solar irrigation with Internet of Things capabilities, so that the solar pump drives the irrigation, but also provides, business analytics and protects water table, et cetera. And they're very close to sustainability, but they rely on a blended finance model. Particularly to drive research and development. And I wonder what Janvi and Chris think about the importance or how blended finance is relevant in this space right now. Would either one of you? Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I'm gonna say, Giovanni, you should take that for sure. Go right ahead.
Honestly, with regards to AgTech, it's still quite a nascent space in India. We are seeing a lot of equity investments flowing in, but blended finance is not something we've seen catch up in the Indian ecosystem yet. So I'd limit my comments to there. Anything you'd want to add, Chris? Go ahead.
Just I think I think my key point back to sort of innovative financial instruments is important, and then where the funding is coming from is critical. I think Acumen has made some of the first equity investments in a lot of the businesses we serve, but uses convertible debt, which often is just equity again, to assist. I think we're seeing proliferation of innovative and less paperwork, frankly, instruments like safes and various other sort of creative capital matching needs coming up in this space now. And that, frankly, our philanthropy-backed financing model here is critical, sort of the market return expectations plus the risk combination that we're going with here. So we're at Acumen trying to combine the financial rigor of private markets with the transparency and flexibility of philanthropic capital. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, great. Well, I think it falls to me now to just give a minute of summary and summary thought, and then we'll go ahead and move back to the main panel. And, I think that, where we landed here was a point that Chris made from the very beginning, that we still really need flexible financing mechanisms. And we need to possibly be thinking about more realistic returns, but also hearing from Janvi that there are organizations punching through to scale, and that bundling and meeting multiple farmer needs is going to be a critical pillar of making all of that happen. And frankly, it's really, really nice to work with investors and hear investor voice that is so focused on the farmers and what the farmers' needs are. In order for DCAS to work, it does have to be hyper local. Really interesting to hear about Chris and Victoria's experience of farmer frustration. When the tech doesn't work for them, when it doesn't really, we're really going to have to push ourselves to make sure that this is tailored, to make sure that it helps drive behavior change. There's a role for digital, but there's also still, as I think everybody was agreeing, a very, very important role for boots on the ground. One of the things that one of the questions that came through from the group was, hey, wow, Busara did some research. Can we see it? And so this is just to maybe finish the summary here. It's the role of the Digital Agri Hub to begin to figure out what these gaps are and to create resources and transparency on solutions. What I heard from the audience was that they need more information about impact. They need more information about solutions, things that work, bundles that work. So this is great information. We want to thank the panelists so much, and thank the audience for contributing this in. And I'm sure the Digital Agri Hub will be taking it into consideration in the next strategic phase of the dashboard. Please keep your eye on it and do participate. And I think with that, we're right on time, and they'll be moving us into the main plenary. And it says, we kindly request everyone to return to the main session for closing remarks. Okay, and so I imagine, Inder, just since you're giving us instructions, do they need to do anything specifically, or will this just end and they'll be carried over naturally? Okay. You can, let's see, leave this session and join the other session. Okay, so you need to go ahead and effectively leave this session, and then that will carry you over to the other. Again, thank you so much to the group. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Chris, John V,
everyone.
Victoria, and the organizers. We really appreciate this chance for the discussion.